capable of landing and stopping safely at our destination. Destination. What does destination mean? You know what destination means? What? Place you're trying to get to. That's right. So, can we get the airplane in the air safely where we are? And can we get the airplane on the ground safely where we intend to go? The length of the runway is important. We need to be able to get to break ground. But what's on the other end? Do we have mountains over there? Do we have trees over there? Or what? We don't know. So whatever we've got to understand if we're going to attempt. What does attempt mean? What does attempt mean?
Proceed.
Proceed?
Proceed.
Yeah, basically, let's be a little more, what do you think? What does attempt mean, specifically? That's it, try. To try something, good. So, proceed, yeah, that's good. So, we don't want to get in an airplane and we can't get it off the ground. And when we do get it off the ground, we can't get it over the trees or the house on the other end. And then once we get over the trees, are we down in a valley and are we going to hit a mountain? So we want to be careful of all of that. There's a lot of things that affect what the airplane is going to do. We call what the airplane is capable of doing performance. Performance. How does something perform? How does your bicycle perform? How does your computer perform? What can it do? Some airplanes have more power than others, and some airplanes less weight. All of that stuff affects whether you can get an airplane in the air or not, and how much weight you put on it. Also, the air. Now we got air around here. I think everybody agrees it gets hot. By that, it gets hot. Okay. Warm air is less dense. What does dense mean? What's dense? His head is dense. That means it's hard. Okay? Mine is empty. That means, okay? So, dense is how things are compacted. Think about Walmart on Christmas Eve. You ever been to Walmart on Christmas Eve? You're right. It's packed. It's really packed. Think about Target at 3 o'clock in the morning. Less people. You buy that? That makes sense? You go to Target? I go to Target every now and then. I can't afford it or whatever. Okay. How much, what is it? Dense. The density. The density of something is how much is packed into this space. Air is the same way. Air has particles in it. The air is, there's moisture in the air. That's humidity. Humidity in the air is really moisture. And it stays it doesn't turn into a liquid or a solid if the temperature is right. But if the temperature becomes less warm or colder, the air can condense and some of the particles can turn into moisture. That's what we got when we have fog. We've got a lot of moisture-laden air and it's warm. You cool it off temperature become invisible. They become part of the air surrounding you. As the air is warm, and as it's warm, it rises and it reaches a point where the moisture in the air condenses. You know what condenses mean? Condensation. What's condensation?
It's when the water, the evaporation from the water rises and starts to form gas.
Right on. Okay. Now, when the moisture condenses, it becomes visible. You've got visible moisture, but it's out there. The particles of air lift, or is what the wing moves through. The wing of the airplane moves through the particles of air and create lift, if the speed is right. Okay? If the air is colder, the particles of air are further apart. Make sense? Cold air, further apart. So if you need, let's say you need 37, you need to fly through 37 particles of air to create enough lift to lift this airplane. Well, if you've got warm air, the particles are closer together, right? Right? You just shaking your head, or do you agree with me? Okay. All right. So, warm air, the particles of air are closer together. Consequently, in order for the airplane to go through those 37 particles of air and create enough lift, it doesn't need as much space to do it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You with me? You agree? Now, if you disagree, you got to tell me. Okay. Now make that same air colder. What happens? The particles of air are further apart. You understand? All right. If the particles of air are further apart, how many particles of air do I need to do to fly through to give lift to this? In my example, 37, right? I need 37 particles of air in my example. That's not realistic, but that's for example's sake. If the particles of air are further apart, do I have to go further or not to get through that 37 particles of air?
Further.
Yes. So I got to go further. Temperature causes the air to become less dense or more dense. So if it's colder air, the particles of air are further apart. If it's warmer air, the particles of air are closer together. The particles of air are closer together the closer to the ground you get. So here in Pensacola, Florida, the particles of air are much closer together than in Denver, Colorado. How high is Denver, Colorado? Do you know? You probably do. 1 mile, 5,280 feet. How high is Pensacola? 103 feet. Which one's higher? Denver. Denver is higher altitude. As you go up, the particles of air get thinner. Air gets thinner. So, if I'm going to to get this airplane off the ground. And if I'm in Denver, I still need 37 particles of air in Denver, but they're further apart. So do I need a longer runway or a shorter runway? Come on, talk to me. Yeah, why? Why do I need more space? Because air's thinner. You could have said, because air's thinner, dummy. You've been talking about 5 minutes. Thank you, I'm making it. So, as we get higher in altitude, we have less, we have, let me back up. We can go farther if we are higher in altitude with the same amount of energy than we can go if we were closer to the ground, because the air is thinner up high. It is also colder. So the colder the air, that spreads stuff out too. The particles of air. That's the reason the jet engine is designed to go high. It needs less air and it needs colder air. And colder air and less air go together. That's what we need. Well, how do we know how much air we need? How do we know that? How do we know how many particles of air we have to go through to get this airplane off the ground? When the manufacturer builds the airplane, he breaks out his computer and he figures all that stuff out. He says, okay, the density altitude of the air, the density altitude at a certain spot is so much. And we need a density altitude of a specific number to get a specific type of performance. So, depending on what that density altitude is going to tell you what your takeoff performance of the airplane. How do you know what that is? You go to the performance charts. In every airplane manufactured today, Section 5 of the Aircraft Information Manual is performance. That tells you those things. So, you're going to see that. Now, in everything you do in life, if you do any banking, if you go on a diet, if you're traveling in a vehicle, whatever, you're going to have some type of graph. What's a graph? You know what a graph is? What's a chart? You got, I don't know, you probably got it. We've got an atlas. I know I used to do it when I went to Walmart. I'd look at the atlas because there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, and it's got road maps in there, and you'll have San Francisco, San Diego, Denver, whatever at the top, and then down the side you'll have Pensacola or the same thing at the side. And you say, okay, I want to go from San Francisco to Pensacola. And I go down the column under San Francisco until I come to the road that's got Pensacola on it. And I come over until these two intercept. What does intercept mean? Yes. When these two cross or contact each other, there will be a number in there, and that number will say how many miles it is. Have you ever seen any of those kind of charts? If you look in gosh, I don't know what they call them nowadays. You got these big maps, these big map books. Suckers are that big. And you got these big map books, and you can open it up, and near the front, it'll have this chart in there, and it'll tell you how many miles it is to go to somewhere. The next chance you get in a bookstore or somewhere, take a look at that and see what that's all about. But you're going to have charts all of your life. You need to have a basic idea of how to read it, where the two lines come together. All right. What we've got here, this is the. Move it down just a little bit so I can read the top of this. Whoops. That's good right there. Okay. Section 5. Ooh. Hit the mouse. There you go. That's good. All right. This is for a Cessna 172 Sierra model, and the short field takeoff distance at a gross weight of 2,550 pounds. That's what this chart addresses. Okay? So you can look that up. Then, what are the conditions? You're going to use 10 degrees of flaps. You're going to full throttle at brake release. Go down just one. That's good. That's good. You're going to use full throttle before you release the brakes. That means you get at the end of the runway, you stand on the brake, and you add full power. And the thing is just sitting there not going anywhere. The reason for that is to get the speed up. Now this is a short field takeoff. Alright? Your runway is a paved, level, dry runway. Big deal. Is it paved? If it's not, if it's a grass runway, is it easier for you to walk on the sidewalk out there than it is for you to walk through the grass? Which is easier? Why?
Because just like planes, well, grass slows you down, but with concrete, you can walk without being slowed down.
Yeah, you don't bump into the grass, and the grass is grabbing you by the leg saying, don't go, don't go, don't go. Yeah, okay, so it's like sand. If you're walking on the sidewalk or the pavement, and then you're walking in the sand, it's harder to walk in the sand. So that kind of slows you down. Alright? So that's going to slow you down. That's going to get your takeoff roll. A longer takeoff road. It keeps you on the ground longer. Alright? Paved, level, dry runway. What if it's uphill? That's going to require more. Okay? What if it's downhill? I tell you, you get a chance one of these days, get on the internet and look up some of the Kodiak landings in short field airport landings. Man, it's amazing. Those airplanes are taking off on the sides of mountains. When I was in Vietnam, we had some helicopters could not lift us off. We were so loaded and it was so hot and all that kind of stuff. And what they would do, they would run it down the hill. They'd point it down the hill. And then get full power going and get it rolling on the wheels of the skids and get it going as best as they could. And then they'd reach a certain speed and they'd start flying and we'd get out of there. And that was interesting. Okay, so can get in the air sooner. Why do you think that is? What do you think? Why?
Because the wind is lifting up.
You got it, man. Keep going.
It's lifting it up, so it's like a bunch of power in the air. I'm just
Like an aircraft carrier. They turn that aircraft carrier, those things are going 40 knots published. They're probably doing 50 or 60. I'm flying an airplane out here. If I didn't tie it down on an aircraft carrier, it'd be flying all over the place. The wind is a big deal. Keeping in mind, what creates lift is the speed of the wing moving through the air. If the wing is tied to a boat and the boat is moving through the air at a certain speed, the airplane doesn't know that. The wing doesn't know that. All it knows is it wants to fly. Does that make sense? Okay. Wind is a big deal. Speed at a 50 foot is 50 KIAS. Knots indicated air speed. KIAS. Knots indicating air speed. So, speed at 50 feet elevation is 50 knots on your airspeed indicator. Alright? Can you just move this chart up a little bit? That's try that. Yeah, you can. So do something. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I got it now.
Okay. This is a different chart, but it's the same principle.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. All right. Pressure altitude. In other words, what is the altitude that you are taking off from? The altitude is like in Pensacola, 103 feet. Pensacola Airport's 103 feet. Ferguson Airport right down the road here is 50 feet. Okay? And what is the pressure altitude? That's this down here. Okay? Alright? Sea level, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, and the temperature. Airplanes are used all over the world. A lot of countries use temperature graduated in centigrade. We in the United States, we graduate our temperature in Fahrenheit. It's different. Is it practical? No. It's a pain in the butt. But that's the way it works. A lot of things you're going to have to deal with in your life are a pain in the butt. So you just better figure out how to manage it. All right. So this is in centigrade. So 0 degrees C. 0 degrees centigrade is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So if we've got 30 degrees centigrade, man, that's hot. That's hot. 30 degrees centigrade. 30 degrees Fahrenheit is below freezing. It ain't hot. This is somewhere around 85 degrees. I can figure it, but I don't want to clutter your brain up for that. I'm too lazy to do it anyway. So, we need to know, we know we're on a paved runway. We know we've got 0 wind blowing. We're going to say, all right, we're at sea level. Okay? We are at sea level. That's where we enter the chart. We know that the temperature is 30 degrees centigrade. Now you've got centigrade on your aircraft instruments. It's centigrade and Fahrenheit. So we know we got 30 degrees centigrade, and we know if we add full power, paved, level, dry runway, release the brakes, until the time we break ground is going to be 750 feet. See that? Does that make sense? 760 feet, I'm sorry. 760. So we can look at that. That's break ground. Now what if we got a tree on the other end? We're going to have to get over that tree, or we're going to be doing some climbing. Total feet to clear 50-foot obstacle. 760 to break ground. 1,290 total feet to break or to clear a 50-foot obstacle. So, when you're reading performance charts, you got to figure out what the new word here, criteria, is. What does criteria mean?
Well, no, it's kind of like the basics of something.
You're on the right track.
Like format type of thing.
You're on the right track. If what criteria must you meet to come to this class? You got to be able to get out of bed in the morning. You got to get a ride. You got to feel your belly. All of that kind of stuff. That's the criteria you got to get here. So, what is the criteria? What are we trying to meet? Help me out here, guys. Am I making sense?
What were you saying, Brent?
Expectations.
Yeah, kinda. Expectations is more results, but it could be the criteria. What do you have to do to? Main criteria is, what is the criteria to have breakfast? You got to be hungry. That's criteria. Okay. So, all of these things affect the performance of the airplane. And there's a lot of them. This right here, the temperature is a big deal. Big deal. And the altitude. We're generally concerned with density altitude, in other words, how dense is the air. And we're generally concerned with pressure altitude and cruise performance. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this performance thing. I just want you to understand, because you're needed as a tool in getting through life, is how to read charts. They've got charts where two lines cross. They've got charts where their curvature. They've got and charts where the two lines cross is generally what you're looking for. But you're going to have to understand charts. In this case, we're talking about performance charts. Okay. Anybody have a question on that? All right. I want to get into the, let's get to, see if we can get to the, just run it down some more and see if we can get another chart. Keep going. Oh, stop. Okay. Okay. If you do take off and you get it in the air and you get over the 50-foot obstacle, there may be a mountain around. And you're going to have to climb over that mountain. Or hit it. It won't be a big deal. You won't hit it once. higher, and as your altitude gets higher, does the airplane perform better or worse?
Worse.
Why?
Because there's something.
Because the air's thinner. It performs worse. It doesn't have as much air to grab a hold of and pull itself through to get through all of those particles of air. So the performance at 1,000 feet is much, much better than the performance at 5,000 feet. And also the engine. The engine needs a specific amount of air and fuel to come together to cause the engine to run. As you get higher, the air becomes less dense, in other words, less air, but the engine is set for a specific amount of fuel. So what happens to that fuel-air mixture? Is it the same at 5,000 feet as it is at 1,000 feet?
No.
Why not?
Because the air is thinner, so it's not as much.
The air center is not as much air there. You go higher, you're going into an atmosphere of less air, but you're not changing the mixture. You're not changing the fuel. It's the same. We have that little red knob on your control column, on your flight controls, is a mixture control. It is set for maximum takeoff performance at sea level. That's the way it's set. As you climb through 2,000, 3,000 feet, you're not going to get the same performance that you got at sea level. Change the mixture. Reduce the amount of fuel. How much? There's gauges and technology that'll tell you that. General rule of thumb is gently start bringing back until you watch, you see the engine RPM begin to reduce and then push it back. That's the older airplanes in the general rule of thumb. Nowadays, with the technology, you got a fuel flow gauge that tells you, and you've got fuel flow in there. Over on the left-hand side, there's 4 gauges over there together. One of them's the fuel flow. And it'll tell you what the fuel flow is. And the fuel flow is going to give you, at 1,000 feet, will not give you the same performance at 5,000 feet. Why? Why? Come on, talk to me.
Because you're getting higher.
Density. Yes. Temperature affects density. You're going higher. There's less air. Yes. So, you can adjust that mixture. And that's one of these controls. Now, are we going to mess with that here? I don't know. If you get to a point where that's something you understand and you want to do it, fine. That's not something that we have to do, and we can get away with it on these simulators. But we'll start trying it out and see how it works. Okay. How much? We've got here the climb speed, the rate of climb, feet per minute. How many feet are we going to climb in indicated airspeed. Now, knots is a unit of measurement. We've got statute miles and we've got nautical miles. Knots is nautical miles. You know that? Knots is nautical miles. Most airplanes today, the airspeed indicator is measured in knots, and the distance is measured in knots. So, at sea level, at a climb speed of 74 knots and full power, rate of climb is 730 feet per minute at 2,550 pounds for a Cessna 172S. Now for a 747, that's a little bit different. We're not flying a 747. Time in minutes from sea level. I'm at sea level. Hello? Okay, 1,000 feet. Climb speed 73 knots. Now the speed has dropped off. Why? Why have we got less speed at 1,000 feet than we had at 74 at sea level?
Because there's less air. I mean, more air.
The air gets thinner as we climb. We start off at sea level, we can produce 74 knots and keep our what we need, and as we get higher, that speed reduces. Okay, 73 knots. Our rate of climb is 695 minutes. 695 feet per minute, FPM, feet per minute. So if we fly 1,000 feet, 73 knots, we're going to, our rate of climb is going to be 695 feet per minute. How long is it going to take? 1 minute. And how much fuel are we going to use? Now we're getting serious. Because when we start using, we run out of fuel, we're going to land. If we're lucky and we can choose the right place to land, it's not a big deal. But generally it's a big deal. Okay, fuel used per gallon is almost a half a gallon, and the distance in nautical miles is 2 miles. Distance nautical miles. What's causing the airplane to go through the air when the engine quits? Air. How do we get that air? How do we get the airplane to go through that air? The aerodynamics. But what energy is pushing it through the air? The engine quit. Engine doesn't work. Gravity. Two sources of power, engine and gravity. What keeps the airplane in the air is the speed of the airplane moving through the air. Okay, so we can utilize gravity. So what they're saying here is distance in nautical miles. You covered with the engine going, we climbed 1,000 feet and we traveled 2 miles. We go to 6,000 feet, we travel 13 miles. Well, why do we need to know all of that? If we're going to go from here to Tallahassee, we need to know how much fuel we're going to burn in the climb to determine how much fuel we need to get to cruise altitude. Then we're going to go to the cruise chart and see what it says at the cruise chart, and it'll tell us how much fuel we need to cruise for however many miles. And then we go to the descent chart, and it tells us how many miles we need or how much fuel we need to descend. That regulations, visual flight rules, VFR. For VFR regulations, okay, yeah. VFR regulations, visual flight rules, we got to add 30 minutes of fuel. So we know exactly how much fuel we're going to need to complete this trip. And you're going to stake your life and the life of your passengers on that mathematics. Are you? What if something changes? Guys, you've got to have an out. Everything you do in life, you need an alternate. What's my plan if things go wrong? And we have a law called Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. Okay, that's enough on the charts. Charts will put you to sleep, but they are essential. They're a pain in the butt. You've got to do them. You're going to get to the point in your aviation career that you can figure out, I know how much fuel I'm going to burn going from here to Tallahassee because I've been to Tallahassee 40 times. And I know. But until you reach that point, you've got to understand these charts. Any questions? Anybody got anything to say? Anything? Okay.
You know what, got one.
So you know how earlier we talked about go over a mountain? Can't you just go around?
Sometimes you can, but most of the time, it's depending on the height of the mountain. Now, if you were flying to Washington State, you know that's all the way by the Pacific Ocean, at 2,000 miles away. If you're going out there, there may be, and there are what we call pass. A pass. A pass is a big valley that you got a mountain sticking up over here and you got a mountain sticking up here. There's a pass in between them, and you can do that. However, these mountains sticking up on your side got rocks in them. They can ruin your whole day. So you got to make sure you get it right. You got to be able to see. The mountains create weather problems that affect the visibility and also the winds and a lot of things there. So, and in some cases, when you're flying out west, you go around the mountains, and it's a longer route. Yes, to answer your question. And the higher performance airplanes, commercial airplanes, that kind of stuff, you can go over the mountain. And weather, you're not going to go over the weather. Not in the kind of airplanes that we're flying. You got to figure out how to go around the weather or don't go. Stay on the ground. Does that make sense to you? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Is there a better term for like sea level? That's what I was kind of getting confused.
Do what now?
Is there a better term for sea level? You know,
In terms of the day, time of day?
like a definition. But you gotta get what sea level.
Okay. Yes, makes sense. Perfect, great question. We have what we call, when we say sea level, we mean the height of the sea, the ocean. We don't live on the ocean, we live next to the ocean. And we start our planning and we start our information by saying sea level. In other words, if I say to you, Okay, I'm keep going here. You gotta have something to base things on, because things like if I say above freezing, you know what freezing is. You got your jacket on and your boots and your hat and so forth and so on. You try to keep it freezing your butt off. You know, okay, this is freezing. That's the starting point. All right. Well, if I say, well, temperature is 20 degrees. 20 degrees what? 20 degrees above freezing? 20 degrees below freezing? 20. There's got to be a baseline. Where's the bottom line? The bottom line is sea level. When your fuel tank is empty as in nothing, what does that mean? That's where you start. So if I say, how much fuel do you have in your car? How much fuel do you have in your airplane? You say 20 gallons. Well, you got 2 tanks. Is it 20 gallons in each tank, or 20 gallons combined with 2 tanks? Or you can say, total fuel in my airplane is 50 gallons. Now you know. You know. So then you need a place to start. When you say sea level, that's where you start. That's a good point. That's a good point. Thank you. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Anything else? Okay? All right. What do we got? 10 minutes?
Question, guys, at what point is it freezing? 32 degrees.
32 degrees what?
Yeah.
What is it centigrade?
0 degrees.
Yeah, what? And also another word for centigrade is Celsius. Celsius. C-E-L-S-I-U-S. Celsius. You'll hear that a lot.
Good job, man.
Any other questions? Okay.
No questions, take a break, about 10 minutes. And come back and get started. Then about 20 minutes after that, Mr. Navarro should be back to lunch.
Make sense?